I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. When I called to ask when the wedding was, she said, "We already got married. Mom, we only invited people who really matter. Just send the beach house keys and stop being so dramatic." I just smiled and hung up. 3 days later, I left a wedding gift at their door that made her husband scream nonstop. I'm Karen Brooks, 65 years old, and until 3 days ago, I thought I knew my daughter. We used to talk every day. Chloe would call during her lunch break, and we'd chat about everything work gossip, the latest Netflix shows, her dating disasters. When she met Ryan, I was genuinely happy for her. She deserved someone who appreciated her brilliant mind and kind heart. "Mom, he's different," she said that first night, practically glowing. "He really gets me." I'd prepared my famous lasagna, the one Chloe had been requesting since she was 12. The house smelled of garlic and basil, and I'd set the table with my good china, the set I usually reserve for Christmas. My Cape Cod beach house photos lined the mantel, showcasing 15 years of summer memories. Ryan Miller arrived in an expensive suit, carrying roses and compliments about my home. He was handsome in that polished way, tall, blonde, with a carefully maintained tan and a smile that seemed practiced in front of mirrors. Chloe had dated before, but I'd never seen her look at anyone the way she looked at him. "Mrs. Brooks, these roses reminded me of the ones in your front yard," he said, handing me a bouquet. "Chloe mentioned you have quite the green thumb." "Thank you, Ryan. Please, call me Karen," I said, taking the flowers. They were expensive, the kind you don't find at the grocery store. "And yes, gardening has been my therapy since retiring from nursing." "Nursing, what an honorable profession," Ryan exclaimed, following me into the dining room. "Emergency medicine, right? Chloe mentioned you worked in trauma for 30 years. I nodded, surprised that Chloe had shared that detail. "Yes, at Boston Memorial. Nothing I haven't seen or heard." "I'm afraid." His laugh seemed genuine. "I bet you have some stories." During dinner, Ryan asked thoughtful questions about my career and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. He complimented the lasagna, helped clear the table, and even offered to wash dishes. Perfect gentleman behavior that should have been charming but felt somehow rehearsed. "This beach house in Cape Cod sounds amazing," he said, studying a photo of Chloe and me standing on the deck, the ocean behind us. "Beachfront property is such a sound investment. The appreciation must be incredible after 15 years. That was the first time he mentioned the beach house. I didn't think much of it then. "It's been in the family since my husband's parents purchased it. William and I renovated it ourselves before Chloe was born. And the property values in that area have tripled in the last decade." "Haven't they?" Ryan asked, his eyes still on the photo. That was the second time. By the time dessert came around my homemade tiramisu, Ryan had mentioned the beach house a third time, asking about property taxes and insurance costs near the water. Something nagged at me, but I pushed it aside. Chloe was happy, and that's what mattered. "Your mother raised an amazing daughter," Ryan told me as he hugged me goodbye. "You must be so proud." I was proud. Chloe had a successful marketing career, owned her condo, and had never needed to rely on anyone. She was independent, strong-willed, and confident everything I'd raised her to be. But that night, after they left, I sat alone in my living room, turning my wedding ring around my finger, a habit I'd kept even 7 years after William's death. Though we'd been divorced for years before he passed away. Something about Ryan's perfect smile reminded me of my ex-husband. William had that same charm, that same way of making you feel special until he decided you were no longer useful to him. It was probably nothing, just an old woman being overprotective. I was wrong. 3 weeks after that first dinner, I noticed the change. Chloe's daily calls became every other day, then twice a week, then weekly. When we did talk, our conversations felt rushed, superficial. Gone were the long chats about her coworkers or my garden or the books we were reading. Now it was quick updates, polite questions, and, "I've got to run. Mom, is everything okay with you and Ryan?" I asked during one of these abbreviated calls. "Everything's perfect," she said, but her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. He's just teaching me about work-life balance. I didn't realize how much time I spent on the phone every day. I bit my tongue. At 28, Chloe was entitled to manage her own time, but teaching me struck an odd chord. My sister Elizabeth noticed it too when she visited from Chicago that spring. "Chloe seems different," she said one evening as we sat on my porch, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. "More controlled," I sighed, swirling the ice in my lemonade. "Ryan has opinions about everything: her friends, her job, even her relationship with me." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "Sounds familiar." It did sound familiar. Too familiar. Like William in those early years before he left us when Chloe was 8, before the bankruptcy, before I had to rebuild our lives from scratch. William Brooks had been charming too, right until he lost everything in a bad real estate development with a partner who'd embezzled funds. The stress had changed him. He'd become angry, distant, and finally, absent. One day he was simply gone, leaving me to raise Chloe alone with nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a broken-down car. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse, saved every penny, eventually bought a small house, put Chloe through college, and somehow managed to keep the beach house the only asset the creditors couldn't touch because it had been placed in a family trust. When William died 3 years ago, there was no fortune to inherit, just debts and regrets. Chloe and I had long ago stopped expecting anything from him. The memories made my stomach tight. I pushed them away. "You're overthinking this," I told Elizabeth. "Ryan makes Chloe happy. That's what matters." "Just keep your eyes open, Karen," my sister said, squeezing my hand. "Men like that don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are." Over the next few months, I watched Ryan slowly insert himself into every aspect of Chloe's life. She changed her hair from the natural brown she'd always loved to an expensive blonde that required monthly maintenance. Her casual style gave way to designer clothes. Her close-knit group of college friends disappeared from her social media, replaced by couples Ryan knew from his consulting business. Then came the Sunday morning when everything changed. I was deadheading roses in my garden, enjoying the May sunshine, when my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. "Chloe Brooks has updated her status." I tapped the screen, expecting to see vacation photos or perhaps a work achievement. Instead, there was a photo of Chloe's left hand wearing a massive diamond ring with the caption, "He asked." I said yes, can't wait to start our forever together. 53 likes and counting. Comments from friends and coworkers congratulating her. Not one of them asking where her mother was, because most had probably assumed I already knew. I stared at that photo for 10 minutes, my coffee growing cold as I tried to process what I was seeing. My daughter was engaged, and I'd learned about it from social media. I called her immediately. "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry." Chloe's voice was breathless, excited. "It just happened last night, and we were so caught up in the moment. Ryan surprised me at our favorite restaurant, and then we went back to his place and called his parents, and it got so late, and I was going to call you this morning. I swear." I forced warmth into my voice. "Congratulations, sweetheart. Tell me everything." And she did. For 20 minutes, she gushed about the proposal, the ring, how romantic it all was, how Ryan's parents had immediately started planning an engagement party at their country club, how they were thinking of a spring wedding. "When's the engagement party?" I asked. There was a pause. "Next Saturday. It's going to be small. Just immediate family and a few close friends." "Should I plan to drive down Friday night?" I asked, already mentally selecting my outfit. Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, about that..." Ryan's family has very specific ideas about these events. His mother is quite traditional, and she's planned everything according to their customs. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What does that mean, Chloe?" "It means, well, it's really just for Ryan's side of the family and a few of our couple friends. It's not that you're not important. It's just that they have this way of doing things, and Ryan thinks it's better if we respect that." Ryan thinks. Everything had become about what Ryan thinks. "I see." I kept my voice carefully neutral. "And what do you think? I think Ryan knows his family better than I do." And I want to start off on the right foot with them. You understand. Right? We'll do something special. Just the three of us. Soon. That was 6 months ago. We never did anything special. Just the three of us. The wedding planning happened around me, not with me. Chloe would mention details in passing. They'd found a venue, booked a photographer, chosen flowers. But when I offered to help or asked about specific plans, I was met with vague responses about how Ryan's handling most of it, or his mother has connections. 3 months ago, I asked about the date so I could plan time off from my part-time job at the local library. We're thinking early October, Chloe said. Probably the second weekend. Ryan's researching venues. That sounds lovely. October in New England is beautiful. I hesitated. Are you thinking of having it at the beach house? Oh no, Mom. Chloe's dismissal was immediate. Ryan wants something more elegant, more sophisticated than a backyard beach wedding. The dismissal stung more than I expected. Chloe had always loved our beach house. As a child, she declared she wanted to get married there someday, barefoot in the sand with fairy lights strung between the dunes. Of course, I said. Whatever makes you happy. But I wasn't invited to the venue tours. I wasn't asked about the guest list. I wasn't included in the dress shopping trips that Chloe posted about on Instagram, her future mother-in-law beaming beside her in every photo. I was becoming a spectator in my own daughter's life. The final blow came exactly 2 weeks ago. Chloe called while I was reorganizing my linen closet. A mundane Tuesday evening task that would be forever marked in my memory as the moment everything changed. Mom, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be cool about it. Nothing good ever followed that phrase, but I took a deep breath and sat down on my bed. What is it, sweetheart? Ryan's been doing some research about family dynamics and healthy boundaries in marriage. He thinks it's really important that we establish our independence as a couple from the very beginning. I felt that familiar chill. What kind of independence? Well, he pointed out that I've been relying on you emotionally for most of my life, like calling you when I'm stressed or upset instead of working through things with my partner. He thinks that might create problems in our marriage. Chloe, talking to your mother when you're upset isn't unhealthy. It's normal. But is it Ryan showed me some articles about women who prioritize their mothers over their husbands and how that destroys marriages. I don't want to be that wife. Mom, I closed my eyes, recognizing the manipulation for what it was. Ryan was isolating Chloe from her support system, and he was making her believe it was for her own good. What does this mean practically? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. It means we need to establish some boundaries. Less frequent contact, more space for Ryan and me to build our own traditions. She hesitated. Ryan thinks it would be healthier if we spent the holidays with his family this year, just to break the pattern of dependence. The holidays, we'd spent every Christmas together since William left. It was our tradition, our time. Chloe would drive up from Boston on Christmas Eve, and we'd stay in our pajamas until noon, drinking hot chocolate and opening presents like she was still 12 years old. I see. My voice sounded strange, distant. Anything else? Actually, yes. Ryan thinks the beach house situation is complicated. My grip on the phone tightened. What about the beach house? Well, I've always assumed I'd inherit it someday. But Ryan pointed out that puts a lot of pressure on our relationship. Like, he feels like he can never truly relax there because it's not really ours. It's yours. And if something happened between us and you, we'd lose our vacation spot. Are you asking me to sign the house over to you? Not exactly. Ryan thinks it would be better if we just found our own place, somewhere that's truly ours. He doesn't want to feel like he's constantly under scrutiny from you when we're supposed to be relaxing. Under scrutiny from me, the woman who'd barely seen him in the past year. Chloe, that house has been in our family for 15 years. It's where you learn to swim, where we've made thousands of memories together. I know, Mom, and I treasure those memories. But I'm starting a new family now with Ryan, and he needs to feel like we have our own special places. Our own special places, places that didn't include me. I ended that conversation with promises to think about everything and respect their need for space. But inside, I was already planning, not revenge, Not yet. But I was going to find out exactly who Ryan Miller really was and what he wanted from my daughter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen until 3 a.m., scrolling through Chloe's social media, looking at photos of her and Ryan, studying his face, his body language, the way he always had his arm around her shoulders, not supportive, but possessive. I looked up his consulting firm, Miller Strategic Advisors. The website was sleek but vague, talking about high-value solutions and exclusive client relationships without specifying what services they actually provided. There were no client testimonials, no case studies, no team members listed besides Ryan himself. The address was a virtual office space in downtown Boston, the kind you could rent for $50 a month to give the appearance of legitimacy without actually having a physical presence. I checked LinkedIn. Ryan Miller, CEO and founder. Miller Strategic Advisors. Education Wharton, MBA. Previous employment Goldman Sachs. McKinsey & Company. Impressive credentials. Too impressive. Maybe. My nursing career had taught me to trust my instincts. When a patient's vitals looked normal but something felt off, you investigated further. You didn't wait until the crisis was obvious. By then, it might be too late. Something about Ryan Miller felt off. Very off. The next morning, I made a call to Jason Cooper, a private investigator who'd worked with the hospital on several cases involving insurance fraud. He'd retired the same year I had, but I knew he still took on select clients. "Karen Brooks," he said when he answered. "It's been a while. How's retirement treating you?" "I need your help. Jason, it's about my daughter." "I'm listening." "There's a man in her life. They're engaged. Something's not right." "What are we looking for? Everything? Background? Finances? Criminal history? Previous relationships? I need to know who Ryan Miller really is." "This will cost you," Jason warned. "Deep background checks aren't cheap." "I have savings," I said, "and if I'm right about this man, it'll be worth every penny." "And if you're wrong?" he asked gently. "If he's exactly who he says he is." I thought about that for a moment. "Then I'll happily pay for peace of mind, attend their wedding with a smile, and never tell Chloe I had doubts." Jason agreed to take the case. It would take time. He warned, thorough investigations couldn't be rushed. I gave him all the information I had on Ryan, his supposed employment history, education, the address of his condo in Boston's Back Bay, the names of his parents in Connecticut. "One more thing," I said before we hung up. "Look into any connections to William Brooks, my ex-husband. I don't know why, but something tells me there might be a link." Jason promised to be discreet and thorough. I hung up feeling better than I had in months. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just an old woman being pushed aside. I was still Karen Brooks, trauma nurse, single mother, survivor. And I would protect my daughter, even if she didn't know she needed protection. Little did I know that my intuition about a connection to William would prove more significant than I could have imagined, and that the beach house Ryan seemed so interested in would become the center of a storm that would change all our lives forever. 2 weeks passed. I maintained contact with Chloe, careful not to raise suspicions by suddenly becoming confrontational. We had short, pleasant conversations where I asked no questions about wedding plans or Ryan. I was the perfect picture of a mother respecting boundaries. Inside, I was counting the days until Jason called with his findings. When my phone finally rang on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I nearly jumped out of my skin. "I need to see you in person," Jason said without preamble. "Today, if possible." My heart sank. Jason wouldn't request an in-person meeting unless what he'd found was serious. "That bad? Let's just say you were right to be concerned. Can you meet me at Riverside Coffee in an hour?" Riverside Coffee was a small cafe near the library where I worked part-time. Quiet, with secluded booths and enough ambient noise to make eavesdropping difficult. "I'll be there." Jason looked exactly as I remembered, tall, with salt and pepper hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd spent decades observing human behavior. He had a manila folder on the table in front of him and a half-finished cup of coffee. "Karen," he stood to greet me with a brief hug. "You look well?" Let's skip the pleasantries. Jason, what did you find? He gestured for me to sit and pushed the folder toward me. Ryan Miller isn't who he claims to be. I opened the folder to find a neatly organized set of documents. The first was a copy of Ryan's resume, with several items highlighted in yellow. The Wharton MBA fake. He attended for 1 semester before dropping out. Goldman Sachs. He worked in their mailroom for 6 months, not as an investment banker. McKinsey. No record of employment whatsoever. I flipped through the pages. His consulting business. Registered as an LLC 3 years ago. No employees, minimal tax filings, no significant business activity that I could trace. It's essentially a shell company. So what does he actually do for money? Jason took a sip of his coffee. That's where it gets interesting. Ryan has access to several offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Regular transfers from those accounts fund his lifestyle. Illegal activity, I asked. Not necessarily, but suspicious. The accounts were established in the 1990s. Long before Ryan would have been old enough to open them himself. They appear to be family money, but not from the Millers of Connecticut. I frowned. I don't understand. Jason pulled out another document. Ryan's real name is Ryan Morrison. He changed it legally 6 years ago. His parents aren't James and Olivia Miller, the wealthy Connecticut couple he's introduced to Chloe. Those people exist, but they're paid actors he hired for appearances. Paid actors. I felt dizzy. Who does that? Someone running a long con, Jason said grimly. There's more. Ryan Morrison has been engaged twice before. First to Emma Morgan in 2019, daughter of a hotel chain owner in Seattle. That engagement ended abruptly when her family hired a private investigator who discovered financial irregularities. And the second, Sarah Walsh, in 2021. Her family has significant trust fund money. Again. The engagement ended when her brothers became suspicious and started asking questions about Ryan's background. My mouth went dry. A pattern. Exactly. He targets successful women with family money, isolates them from their support networks, and then gains access to their finances. With Emma, he had already been added to several of her bank accounts before the family intervened. I thought of Chloe successful, independent Chloe, and how quickly Ryan had started isolating her from me. You said to look for a connection to William, Jason continued. At first, I found nothing, but then I dug deeper into the origin of those offshore accounts. He pulled out a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, Local developer files bankruptcy after partner disappears with funds. My husband's face stared back at me younger, but unmistakably William, looking shell-shocked outside a courthouse. You know this story, Jason said softly. William was developing a shopping center with a partner. The partner embezzled funds, disappeared. William lost everything. It's why he left us. The bitterness I thought I'd long since overcome colored my voice. The partner's name was Jonathan Reed. I remember. Jason pulled out another document. Jonathan Reed died in Florida in 1994. Before his death, he transferred the stolen funds, approximately $2.3 million, into offshore accounts. Those are the same accounts Ryan has been accessing. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Reed was related to Ryan, his uncle, and according to a deathbed confession witnessed by a nurse, Reed told his nephew about the money he'd hidden away, money that legally belonged to William's estate. I stared at the documents, trying to process what I was hearing. So Ryan knows that money rightfully belongs to William's heir, Chloe, and instead of coming clean, he's decided to marry her to... What legitimizes his claim to it? That would be my guess. Once they're married, he could argue that any claims against those funds would affect their marital assets. It's a twisted but effective way to protect himself while continuing to benefit from the stolen money. How much are we talking about now? With interest? Approximately $4 million. I let out a low whistle. And you think Ryan researched us, found out about William's bankruptcy, and specifically targeted Chloe because of this connection? Jason nodded. There's one more thing you should see. He pulled out a final document, a surveillance photo of Ryan standing across the street from the marketing firm where Chloe worked. The timestamp showed a date 3 weeks before their accidental meeting at a coffee shop. He researched her, stalked her, and engineered their chance encounter. Nothing about their relationship has been genuine from the start. I thought I'd been prepared for anything Jason might find, but this was beyond what I'd imagined. Ryan hadn't just lied about his credentials. He'd created an entire false identity, hired actors to play his parents, and deliberately targeted my daughter as part of a scheme involving money stolen from her own father. "What do we do?" I asked. My nurse's training kicking in assessed the situation, determine the best course of action, implement immediately. "That depends," Jason said carefully. "If you go to Chloe with this, are you prepared for her not to believe you, Ryan, has spent nearly 2 years isolating her from you and building his narrative? She might choose him." The thought made my stomach twist, but I knew Jason was right. If I confronted Chloe directly, Ryan would spin it as jealousy or interference. He'd already convinced her that our close relationship was unhealthy. "I need more than documents," I said finally. "I need irrefutable proof that even Chloe can't deny." "That could take time," Jason warned. "And if they're planning an October wedding—" "Actually, I'm not sure there's going to be an October wedding anymore," I said, a suspicion forming in my mind. Ryan knows we're on to him. How the sudden push for boundaries, the conversation about the beach house. He's accelerating his timeline. I think he might try to rush Chloe into eloping. Jason nodded slowly. It fits the pattern. When the Morgan family started investigating him, he tried to convince Emma to elope to Vegas. "Keep digging," I said, standing up. "Especially into those offshore accounts. I need something concrete connecting them to the money stolen from William. And what will you do in the meantime?" I thought about the beach house. The way Ryan's eyes had lingered on those photos during our first dinner. How he'd mentioned property values 3 times. "I'm going to give Ryan exactly what he wants," I said, "and watch what he does with it." As I walked to my car, rain dripping from the edges of my umbrella, I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of calm that used to come in the emergency room when a critical patient arrived and there was no time for panic, only action. Ryan Morrison had made one crucial mistake in his calculations. He'd assumed I was just another helpless mother who would quietly accept being cut out of her daughter's life. He'd underestimated what happens when you back a woman into a corner and take away the thing she loves most in the world. I wasn't going to confront Ryan or try to convince Chloe of the truth, not yet. I was going to set a trap. And Ryan, with his greed and arrogance, would walk right into it. The call I'd been dreading came 3 days later, on a Wednesday morning while I was deadheading my roses. Chloe's name appeared on my phone screen, and for a split second, I felt that old surge of joy before remembering how things stood between us now. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was different, flat, mechanical. "Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I'm calling to let you know that Ryan and I got married yesterday. It was a small ceremony, just immediate family and our closest friends." I stopped breathing. "Yesterday, but I thought you were having a wedding in October." "We decided to do something more intimate. Ryan felt like a big wedding was too much pressure, too commercial. We found a beautiful venue in Martha's Vineyard and kept it simple. Simple and secret, apparently." "Congratulations," I managed. I'm sure it was beautiful. It was perfect. Ryan's parents were there, and his sister flew in from California. My friend Jessica was my maid of honor, and Ryan's best friend Tom was his best man. The photographer got some amazing shots. She was listing off details like she was reading from a catalog, not describing the happiest day of her life. But what struck me most was what she wasn't saying. No apology for not including me. No acknowledgement of how painful this must be for me. "That sounds lovely. Chloe, I'm happy for you. Thanks." A pause. "Oh, and Mom, Ryan and I were wondering if you could send us the keys to the beach house. We're thinking of spending our honeymoon there since we didn't have time to plan a proper trip." There it was, the real reason for the call. Not to share her joy with her mother, not to include me in this major life milestone, but to ask for the keys to property they'd already decided should be theirs. "The keys to the beach house," I repeated slowly. "Right. Ryan's really excited to see it. I've told him so much about it over the years. He's particularly interested in the renovations you've done, and the property value appreciation. Property value appreciation. How romantic. Chloe, when you say you got married yesterday, do you mean you had a ceremony, or do you mean you're legally married? Both. We got the license last week and had the ceremony yesterday. Why, just clarifying. And you didn't think to invite your mother to your wedding. There was a pause. Mom, please don't make this dramatic. It was Ryan's decision to keep it small. And honestly, after everything we talked about regarding boundaries, I thought you'd understand. I understood all too well. My daughter had married a man who had convinced her that cutting her own mother out of her wedding was somehow healthy. I understood that Ryan had succeeded in his plan to isolate Chloe from the one person who might have protected her from him. So, you'll send the keys. We're hoping to drive up this Friday. Of course, sweetheart. I'll make sure you get them. After I hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, staring at my roses and thinking about patterns. Ryan followed patterns. He isolated women from their families, convinced them to give him access to their assets, and then probably moved on when he'd gotten what he wanted or when someone started asking too many questions. But Ryan had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was just another helpless mother who would quietly accept being cut out of her daughter's life. He'd underestimated what happens when you back a woman into a corner and take away the thing she loves most in the world. I called Jason immediately. They got married yesterday, I said without preamble, and now they want the keys to the beach house for their honeymoon. Jason let out a low whistle. That was fast. I'm still working on the offshore accounts, but I've got some solid leads connecting them to Reed. How long will you need? Give me 48 hours. I've located a former nurse who witnessed Reed's deathbed confession about the stolen funds. She remembers him specifically mentioning his nephew and instructions for accessing the accounts when he turned 21. Perfect, I said. I need everything you can get me by Friday morning. Why Friday? Because that's when I'm delivering my wedding gift. I spent the rest of that day making calls and sending emails. By evening, I had everything I needed to give Ryan exactly what he deserved. Not revenge, really justice. The wedding gift I was planning would be far more valuable than anything Chloe might find on her registry. It would be the gift of truth. I've always believed that the best gifts are the ones that keep on giving. So, when I drove to Chloe and Ryan's apartment that Friday morning, I made sure my wedding present would provide lasting memories. The package was beautifully wrapped in silver paper with an elegant white bow. Inside was a leather portfolio containing several items that I'd spent the past 72 hours carefully assembling. Ryan was going to love learning about his new family connections. I left it outside their door with a note. Congratulations on your marriage. Every new husband should know about his wife's family history. With love, Karen. Then I went home and waited. The call came at 2:17 p.m. Chloe's number, but Ryan's voice, and he was screaming. What the hell is wrong with you, you crazy old witch? How dare you send us this garbage? I set down my teacup gently. Hello, Ryan? I take it you opened your wedding gift? This isn't funny. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. I'm confused. Dear, what exactly would you report that your mother-in-law gave you a wedding gift containing public records and newspaper articles? In the background, I could hear Chloe crying. Ryan, calm down. Let me talk to her. No, this woman is insane. She's trying to ruin our marriage before it even starts. I couldn't help but smile. Ryan, surely you're not upset about me sharing some interesting family history. I thought you'd appreciate knowing about the connections between our families. The truth was, I had discovered something absolutely fascinating during my research into Ryan's background. It turns out that Ryan's uncle, Jonathan Reed, had been involved in a rather significant business dealing with my late husband, William. Back in 1987, a real estate development deal that had gone very, very badly. The documents I'd included in the wedding gift told the complete story, how Jonathan Reed and William had been partners in a shopping center development project. How Reed had systematically embezzled funds from their joint accounts. How William had lost nearly everything, including his marriage, because of Reed's theft. How Reed had fled to Florida with over $2 million, leaving William bankrupt and facing lawsuits from investors. But that wasn't the most interesting part. The most interesting part was what I'd discovered in the final report from Jason Cooper. Jonathan Reed had confessed on his deathbed to his nephew Ryan about the money he'd stolen and hidden in various accounts. Money that Ryan had been quietly accessing for years. Money that legally belonged to William's estate, which, since William had died 3 years ago, now belonged to his only heir, Chloe. "Ryan," I said calmly into the phone, "I also included some contact information for the law firm that handled William's estate. They're very interested in speaking with you about those offshore accounts your uncle mentioned in his confession. Apparently, there's quite a bit of money that rightfully belongs to Chloe." The screaming stopped abruptly. "You're lying," he said, but his voice had changed. The rage was gone, replaced by something that sounded distinctly like panic. "I never lie, dear. I'm a retired nurse. We're trained to be very precise about facts, but don't take my word for it. I'm sure your uncle's lawyer in Miami will remember you. Mr. Rodriguez has been very helpful in tracking down the paper trail. I heard Chloe in the background asking what was happening, what money I was talking about. Oh, and Ryan, the beach house keys are in the portfolio too. Consider it my wedding gift to both of you. I'm sure you'll find it very relaxing to discuss your family's financial history while enjoying the ocean views." Then I hung up and poured myself another cup of tea. The next few hours were going to be very interesting indeed. As I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I felt more peaceful than I had in months. Ryan Morrison was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating mothers who had spent decades protecting their children. And Chloe, my brave, brilliant Chloe, would finally see the truth about the man she had married. The gift that keeps on giving. Indeed, Chloe called me at 6:30 that evening. Her voice was hoarse from crying, and I could hear Ryan shouting in the background. "Mom, what did you do? I gave you both a wedding gift, sweetheart. Did you read through everything? I read enough." She lowered her voice. "Ryan says it's all lies, that you're trying to break us up." "What do you think?" "Chloe," there was a long pause. I think I need you to explain some things. Ryan's uncle really stole money from Dad. $2.3 million according to the bank records. Your father spent years trying to recover it, but Jonathan Reed disappeared. The stress of it contributed to your father leaving us when you were 8. Another pause. And Ryan knew about this money. I could hear Ryan's voice getting closer to the phone, his words muffled but clearly furious. The deathbed confession suggests he did. Yes, the private investigator I hired found records of Ryan accessing several of those accounts over the past 5 years. He's been living off money that legally belonged to your father's estate. That's impossible. Ryan has a consulting business. He told me he specializes in investment strategies for high-net-worth individuals. My heart broke a little for her. "Chloe, when's the last time you saw Ryan actually work? When's the last time he had a client meeting or took a business call or showed you a contract?" Silence in the background. I could hear Ryan demanding that Chloe hang up the phone. "The law firm wants to meet with you, sweetheart. As William's heir, you have a legal claim to that money, plus interest. They estimate it's worth nearly $4 million now. $4 million. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. "Ryan married you 3 days after I hired the private investigator. The timing seems rather coincidental, don't you think?" Now I could hear Ryan clearly. He was telling Chloe that I was lying, that I was jealous of their happiness, that I was trying to destroy their marriage because I couldn't stand to see her happy. "Chloe," I said gently, "ask yourself this if none of this is true. Why is Ryan so upset if his uncle was innocent? Wouldn't he want to clear his family's name? Wouldn't he be curious about getting justice for what happened to your father?" The line went quiet except for the sound of Chloe breathing. "There's something else," I continued. "The private investigator also found records of 2 previous engagements, Emma Morgan in 2019 and Sarah Walsh in 2021. Both engagements ended when their families discovered Ryan's financial deception. Both women had family money. Both were isolated from their support systems before the truth came out." "Stop," Chloe whispered. "I have their contact information if you'd like to speak with them." I said stop. The line went dead. I set the phone down and looked out at the darkening sky. Tomorrow, Chloe would have to decide what to believe. Tomorrow, She would have to choose between the man who had isolated her from everyone who loved her and the truth that could set her free. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Ryan Morrison was going to sleep knowing that his carefully constructed house of lies was crumbling around him, and I was going to sleep better than I had in months, knowing that my daughter finally had all the information she needed to make the right choice. The gift that keeps on giving, indeed. The hours after that call were some of the longest of my life. Every few minutes, I checked my phone, hoping for a message from Chloe, dreading a call from Ryan. Neither came. The night passed with me dozing fitfully in my armchair, unwilling to go to bed in case Chloe needed me. I didn't sleep much that night, constantly checking my phone for messages from Chloe. None came. I spent Saturday puttering around my garden, deadheading flowers that didn't need it, pulling weeds that had already been pulled. Anything to keep my hands busy while my mind raced. Had I done the right thing? Should I have confronted Ryan earlier? Would Chloe forgive me for investigating her husband? Would she believe me over him by Sunday morning? I'd convinced myself that I'd lost her forever, that Ryan had somehow managed to spin my revelations as the desperate lies of a jealous mother. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee, when I heard a car door slam outside. I looked out the window to see Chloe walking up my front path, still wearing the same clothes from Friday. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair unwashed, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door before she could knock. "Tell me everything," she said without even saying hello. I made fresh coffee, and we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework as a child, where we'd planned her college applications, where we'd shared 1,000 conversations about everything and nothing. Now, we were going to talk about how the man she'd married was a fraud. "Ryan left yesterday," she said, staring into her coffee cup. "Packed 2 suitcases and said he needed time to think. He told me you were poisoning our marriage with lies and that if I believed you over him, then maybe we weren't meant to be together." Classic manipulation. Give the victim an ultimatum that makes them feel responsible for the relationship's failure. "Where did he go?" "I don't know." "He turned off his phone." Chloe looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "But Mom, I found something." She pulled out a manila folder from her purse. "After Ryan left, I went through his things, his laptop, his desk, everything. I found these." She spread out printed emails across my kitchen table. They were correspondence between Ryan and someone named Jonathan Reed, discussing the Morrison inheritance and maintaining access to offshore accounts. The dates went back 2 years, long before Ryan had even met Chloe. "There's more," Chloe said, her voice getting stronger. "I called Emma Morgan yesterday. The woman from your private investigator's report." I raised an eyebrow. "What did she tell you?" "Everything. How Ryan isolated her from her family, convinced her to put him on her bank accounts, even had her write a will leaving everything to him. Her father hired a detective and discovered Ryan's pattern. When they confronted him, he disappeared overnight." Chloe pulled out her phone and showed me a text message thread. "Emma put me in touch with Sarah Walsh, too. Same story. Mom, exact same pattern. He finds successful women with family money, charms them, isolates them from their support systems, and then gains access to their assets." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Don't apologize. You tried to warn me, and I chose not to listen. I chose to believe a man I'd known for 2 years over the mother who raised me." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Emma told me something else." "What's that?" "She said Ryan actually researched us before he even accidentally met me at that coffee shop. He knew about the beach house, knew about Dad's financial troubles, knew about you being a widow." The coffee shop meeting, Chloe had always thought it was fate that she'd literally bumped into Ryan, spilling coffee on his expensive shirt, leading to their first conversation. Turns out fate had nothing to do with it. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Chloe looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was 12 years old and had decided to stand up to a bully at school, determined, fierce, ready for a fight. "I'm going to destroy him," she said simply. "But I'm going to need your help." For the first time in 2 years, my daughter was asking for my help instead of pushing me away. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I smiled with genuine happiness. Tell me what you need. First, I need a good lawyer, someone who specializes in financial fraud and recovery. I can help with that. The firm that handled your father's estate, Patricia Winters. Chloe nodded. I found her card in your wedding gift portfolio. I already called and left a message. I smiled. That was my girl, always one step ahead. Second, I need more evidence. The emails are damning, but Ryan's careful. Most communications are vague enough that he could claim they're about legitimate business dealings. Jason Cooper, my investigator, has been tracking the offshore accounts. He's found a direct connection to the money your father lost. Good. Chloe took a deep breath. And third, I need a plan. Ryan's going to come back. Men like him always do. When they think the crisis has passed, he'll apologize, promise to change. Maybe even claim he'd been confused or overwhelmed by the accusations. He'll try to smooth things over and get back to his original plan of accessing your assets. I agreed. Exactly. And when he comes back, I want to be ready for him. The plan we developed over the next few hours was beautifully simple. Ryan would come back eventually when he thought the crisis had passed. He'd apologize, promise to change, maybe even claim he'd been confused or overwhelmed by the accusations. He'd try to smooth things over and get back to his original plan of accessing Chloe's assets. But when he came back, we'd be ready for him. Chloe went home that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in months, she hugged me goodbye, a real hug, tight and lingering, like she used to give before Ryan came into our lives. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered. For everything, for pushing you away, for not inviting you to the wedding, for believing him over you. You have nothing to apologize for, I told her. Ryan is a professional manipulator. That's what people like him do. They isolate their targets from anyone who might see through their facade. Still, she pulled back, wiping away tears. I should have known better. You know now, I said. That's what matters. As I watched her drive away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My daughter was coming back to me not just physically, but emotionally. The walls Ryan had built between us were crumbling, and in their place, something stronger was emerging. Now we just had to make sure Ryan paid for what he'd done. The plan we developed was beautifully simple. Ryan would come back eventually. Men like him always do when they think the crisis has passed. He'd apologize, promise to change, maybe even claim he'd been confused or overwhelmed by the accusations. He'd try to smooth things over and get back to his original plan of accessing Chloe's assets. But when he came back, we'd be ready for him. Chloe called the law firm that Monday and met with Patricia Winters, William's estate attorney. The news was even better than I'd hoped. Not only did Chloe have a legal claim to the money Ryan's uncle had stolen, but because Ryan had been accessing those accounts while knowing they contained stolen funds, he could be charged with criminal conspiracy and money laundering. The statute of limitations on the original theft has expired, Patricia explained to Chloe over the phone, but your husband's recent access to those accounts resets the legal clock. He's essentially been receiving stolen property for years. Patricia also connected Chloe with a federal investigator who specialized in financial fraud. Agent Jennifer Lopez had been tracking Ryan's pattern for months, building a case based on complaints from Emma and Sarah's families. We've been waiting for the right opportunity to move forward, Agent Lopez told us during a conference call. Your situation provides the final pieces we need. If you're willing to cooperate, we can set up a controlled operation. Chloe agreed immediately. She wanted Ryan held accountable, not just for what he'd done to her, but for what he'd done to Emma and Sarah, and who knows how many other women. Wednesday afternoon, Ryan texted Chloe, "Can we talk? I miss you. I'm ready to come home." Chloe showed me the message. Should I respond? Tell him you miss him too, and that you're sorry for doubting him. Tell him you realize I was just jealous and trying to cause trouble. She typed the message, her jaw clenched with anger, but her words perfectly crafted to appeal to Ryan's ego. He responded within minutes, saying he'd be home by Friday evening and that they could start fresh. Agent Lopez briefed us Thursday morning. The apartment will be monitored. Chloe, you'll be wearing a wire, and we'll have agents positioned nearby. All you need to do is get him to admit he knew about the stolen money and that he married you to gain access to your inheritance." "What if he doesn't confess?" Chloe asked. "Then we proceed with the financial evidence we already have. But a recorded confession would strengthen the case significantly and help us pursue charges related to his other victims." Friday evening came faster than I expected. I sat in my living room, supposedly reading a book but actually staring at my phone, waiting for updates. Agent Lopez had given me a number to call if Chloe needed help, though they assured me the apartment was completely secure. At 7:43 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "He's here." At 8:15 p.m., he brought flowers and wine, playing the perfect apologetic husband. At 8:52 p.m., he's talking about planning a real honeymoon, asking about accessing my savings account for deposits. At 9:31 p.m., got him to admit he knew about the offshore accounts. FBI moving in now. I set down my phone and poured myself a glass of wine. Ryan Morrison's predatory career was officially over, but somehow I suspected the most satisfying part was still to come. The local news picked up the story by Monday morning. "Local man arrested in multi-state financial fraud scheme" was the headline in the Portland Press-Herald. They didn't mention Chloe by name, referring to her only as the most recent victim, but Ryan's mugshot was prominently displayed. He looked exactly like what he was, a common criminal whose charm had finally run out. Chloe came over for lunch that day, bringing Chinese takeout and looking lighter than she had in months. "Agent Lopez called this morning," she said, unpacking containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. "Ryan's been formally charged with conspiracy, money laundering, and fraud across multiple states. His bail was set at $500,000. I nearly choked on my tea. $500,000. Apparently, he's considered a flight risk since he has access to offshore accounts and a history of disappearing when confronted. His parents, his real parents, not the actors, can't afford the bail, and his accounts have been frozen pending investigation." We ate our lunch in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Chloe spoke again. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." I set down my chopsticks. "What is it? How long did you know about Ryan's pattern, about what he was really after?" I considered lying or softening the truth, but Chloe deserved honesty. "I suspected something was wrong from the beginning, but I didn't have proof until about 3 months ago. That's when I hired the private investigator." 3 months ago?" Chloe's eyes widened. I nodded slowly. "Right around the time you told me about the boundaries conversation. And you didn't try to warn me directly because you knew I wouldn't believe you." I met her eyes. "Would you have—" She shook her head. "No. I would have thought you were jealous or trying to interfere. Ryan had me so convinced that you were the problem." She paused, playing with her noodles. "How did you know to look into his uncle's background?" "I recognized the name Reed from your father's old papers. When I realized the connection, I knew there had to be more to the story." Chloe was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and sad. "I was so mean to you. Mom, I said terrible things. I excluded you from my own wedding because he convinced me it was healthy." "Chloe, no. Let me finish. I chose a man I'd known for 2 years over the mother who sacrificed everything to raise me alone. I believed his version of what family should look like instead of trusting my own experience. I'm so ashamed." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You were manipulated by an expert predator. That's not your fault. But I should have seen through him. I'm smart, educated, successful. How did I fall for it? Because he targeted those exact qualities. He found a strong, independent woman and convinced her that her strength was actually weakness. That's what predators do. Sweetheart, they don't target weak people. They target people who have something they want." Chloe squeezed my hand. "How do I make this right between us? You already have. You're here. You're safe and you're free. That's all I ever wanted." We finished our lunch and spent the afternoon looking through old photo albums, Chloe pointing out pictures from beach house summers and asking me to tell her stories she'd forgotten. It felt like we were rebuilding something that had been broken. brick by brick. That evening, as Chloe was getting ready to leave, she paused at the door. "Mom, there's going to be a civil trial too. Agent Lopez says the families of Ryan's other victims are filing a class action lawsuit to recover their losses. They want me to be part of it. Are you going to join them?" Chloe smiled, and for the first time in 2 years, it was the fierce, determined smile I remembered from her childhood. "Oh, absolutely. I'm going to make sure Ryan Morrison never has the opportunity to hurt another woman again." "That's my girl," I thought. Welcome back. The weeks leading up to Ryan's preliminary hearing were surprisingly peaceful. Chloe moved back to her old condo, which thankfully she'd kept as a rental property despite Ryan's efforts to convince her to sell it. She resumed her daily calls to me, and we even started planning a weekend trip to the beach house, just the two of us, like old times. But the peace was shattered 3 weeks after Ryan's arrest when Chloe received a call from a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. We were having dinner at my house, another reclaimed tradition. "Is this Chloe Brooks Miller?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Chloe Brooks," my daughter replied firmly. She'd already started the process of reverting to her maiden name. "This is Olivia Miller, Ryan's mother, his real mother." Chloe and I exchanged glances. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Miller?" "Please don't hang up," the woman said quickly. "I know what my son did to you. I know about the others too, Emma and Sarah. I wanted to apologize." "Mrs. Miller, he wasn't always like this," Olivia continued, her voice breaking. "When he was little, he was such a sweet boy. But after Jonathan, his uncle, died, something changed. Jonathan filled his head with stories about easy money and revenge against the people who had wronged them." Chloe's knuckles turned white around her fork. "Mrs. Miller, I appreciate your call, but I have information that might help your case," Olivia interrupted. "Things Ryan told his father and me before he cut us off, about the accounts, about how he targeted women. I want to help make this right." Chloe looked at me, eyebrows raised in silent question. I nodded. "I'll have my lawyer contact you, Mrs. Miller," Chloe said finally. "If you're serious about helping, she'll arrange a meeting." "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "And I'm so sorry for all of it." After she hung up, Chloe set her phone down carefully, as if it might explode. "What do you think?" she asked me. "I think it could be legitimate," I said slowly. "Or it could be a trap. Ryan might be using his mother to gather information or to influence you somehow." "That's what I was thinking." Chloe pushed her plate away, appetite gone. "I'll call Patricia tomorrow and let her handle it." But the complications were just beginning. The next day, Chloe received a bouquet of roses at her office with a note. "I made a terrible mistake. Please give me one chance to explain. All my love, Ryan." She sent me a photo of the flowers in the trash can. 2 days later, an expensive watch was delivered to her condo, the one she'd mentioned admiring months ago. The note read, "Time is precious. Don't waste any more of ours. I can explain everything." This too went straight into the trash. Then came the emails from Ryan's attorney, suggesting that Chloe was complicit in accessing the offshore accounts, that she'd known about them all along and only turned on Ryan when she realized she could claim the money for herself. "They're trying to intimidate you," Patricia Winters explained during a conference call. "It's a common tactic. They want you to drop the charges in exchange for them not pursuing these false claims against you." "Can they actually do that?" Chloe asked. "Claim I knew about the accounts. They can try, but they won't succeed. We have the timeline of events, the witness testimony from the nurse who heard Reed's confession, and Ryan's own admission on the FBI recording that you knew nothing about the accounts until your mother revealed them. But why even try this approach? It seems desperate." "Because it is desperate," Patricia said. "Ryan's looking at serious federal charges. His previous victims have come forward. His entire scheme is unraveling, and he's trying anything to save himself." The most disturbing development came a week later when Chloe returned home to find her condo had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her files, the ones containing the emails between Ryan and Jonathan Reed, were scattered across her living room floor. On her bedroom mirror, written in what looked like lipstick, were the words "drop the charges or else." The police took it seriously, installing extra security measures and recommending Chloe stay elsewhere for a few days. She moved in with me temporarily, sleeping in her childhood bedroom while the investigation continued. "I'm not scared," she insisted as we sat on my back porch that evening, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. "I'm angry. He thinks he can intimidate me into backing down after everything he's done." I studied my daughter's profile, noticing the determined set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. Ryan had tried to break her spirit, to mold her into a compliant, isolated puppet. Instead, he'd awakened something in her, a fierce, unstoppable determination to see justice done. "He underestimated you," I said. "Just like he underestimated me," Chloe smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Brooks women are made of stronger stuff than he realized," Agent Lopez called the next morning with news. "We've connected the break-in to a former cellmate of Ryan's who was released 2 days ago. He's back in custody and has agreed to testify that Ryan orchestrated the intimidation attempt." "So Ryan's going to face additional charges?" Chloe asked. "Witness tampering and obstruction of justice, at minimum. This won't help his case at all." Meanwhile, Patricia had met with Olivia Miller and determined her offer to help was genuine. Ryan's mother provided a trove of information journals Ryan had kept as a teenager detailing his uncle's lessons about the offshore accounts, emails between Ryan and Jonathan discussing their plans, even a recorded phone conversation where Ryan bragged about his engagement to Emma and how he planned to access her family's hotel business. "He became obsessed with the idea that your father had somehow wronged his uncle," Olivia explained during a meeting with Chloe, Patricia, and me. "Jonathan convinced Ryan that the bankruptcy was your father's fault, that he'd set Jonathan up to take the fall for his own financial mismanagement." "That's not what happened," I said firmly. "I lived through it. William was devastated. He lost everything because of what Jonathan Reed did." "I know that now," Olivia said, eyes downcast. "But Ryan grew up hearing a different story. By the time he was in college, he'd convinced himself that taking your family's money, or what he saw as his rightful inheritance, was some kind of justice." "And you never tried to stop him?" Chloe asked, a hard edge to her voice. "We tried," Olivia said, tears welling up. "My husband and I both tried. We showed him the court records, the newspaper articles, everything that proved Jonathan was the guilty party. But by then, Ryan was too far gone. He cut us off, legally changed his name, and hired those actors to play his parents whenever he needed to impress someone. It was pathetic and tragic all at once, a young man so twisted by his uncle's lies that he dedicated his life to a warped version of revenge, destroying lives in the process." "Why come forward now?" I asked. Olivia looked directly at me, mother to mother. "Because I can't let him hurt anyone else. As his mother. I failed to stop him before. I won't fail again." With Olivia's evidence added to the growing case against Ryan, the prosecution was confident of a conviction, but Ryan had one last card to play. The day before his trial was set to begin, his attorney approached Patricia with a plea offer. Ryan would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for revealing the locations of all offshore accounts containing stolen funds, not just the ones related to William's case, but others Jonathan Reed had apparently established over years of similar schemes. "He's offering to return all the money," Patricia explained to Chloe. "Not just your father's $4 million, but potentially tens of millions that belong to other victims." "In exchange for what?" Chloe asked skeptically. 5 years instead of the potential 20 he's facing. No restitution beyond returning the actual stolen funds, no interest, no damages, and he wants immunity from any charges related to Emma and Sarah's cases. Chloe was quiet for a long moment, considering. "What happens to the other victims if I say no? The ones whose money is in those other accounts he's offering to reveal? They might never recover their funds," Patricia admitted. "Some of these accounts are incredibly well hidden. Without Ryan's cooperation, they could be impossible to trace." It was an impossible choice accepting a lighter sentence for Ryan in exchange for helping other victims, or pursuing the maximum punishment at the cost of those victims never seeing justice. Chloe looked at me. "What would you do, Mom?" I thought about it carefully. I think I'd want to know what Emma and Sarah think. It's their justice he's trying to bargain away too. Chloe nodded slowly. Can we arrange a meeting with them before I decide? The meeting took place the next day in Patricia's office. Emma Morgan flew in from Seattle, a petite woman with a quiet intensity about her. Sarah Walsh drove up from New York, clearly nervous but determined to have her say. He deserves the maximum sentence, Emma said firmly after Patricia explained the situation. He didn't just take money from me. He took my trust, my self-confidence, 2 years of my life. I agree, Sarah added. If we accept this deal, what message does that send to other predators like him that they can bargain their way out of consequences? Chloe listened carefully, then asked the question that had been troubling her. But what about the other victims, the ones who might never get their money back without his cooperation? Emma and Sarah exchanged glances. We've both been fortunate, Emma acknowledged. My family could absorb the financial loss, even though it hurt. But if there are people out there who lost everything... There's another option, Patricia interjected. We counteroffer. Ryan gets a reduced sentence, say, 10 years instead of 20, but only if he provides verifiable information about all accounts, agrees to testify against any co-conspirators, and makes a full public confession and apology to all his victims. And no immunity for the cases involving us, Sarah added firmly. He still pays full restitution to everyone he harmed. Chloe nodded slowly. I can live with that. Ryan's attorney received their counteroffer that afternoon. The response came within hours. Ryan accepted all terms except the public apology. He claims it would compromise his dignity, Patricia reported with a touch of irony in her voice. Emma actually laughed. His dignity, that's rich. Tell him it's non-negotiable, Chloe said firmly. All terms or no deal. It took another 24 hours of back and forth, but eventually, Ryan conceded. He would plead guilty to multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. He would serve 10 years in federal prison. He would provide complete information on all offshore accounts containing stolen funds. He would pay full restitution to all victims, and he would issue a public apology acknowledging his crimes and the harm he had caused. The plea hearing was set for the following Monday. Chloe, Emma, and Sarah would all be there to witness Ryan's public admission of guilt. It wouldn't undo the damage he'd caused, but it would be a start. As Chloe and I drove home from Patricia's office, I noticed a new lightness in my daughter's demeanor. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something more productive, a determination to move forward, to rebuild, to reclaim the life Ryan had tried to steal from her. You know what I was thinking, she said as we pulled into my driveway. What's that? After all this is over, I want to start a foundation. Something to help women who've been targeted by financial predators like Ryan. Education, legal resources, support groups, whatever they need to protect themselves and recover. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. That sounds like a wonderful idea. I was thinking of calling it the Karen Brooks Foundation, she continued, glancing at me shyly, after the woman who taught me what real strength looks like. Tears pricked at my eyes. I'd be honored. As we walked into the house together, I reflected on how Ryan's attempts to drive us apart had ultimately brought us closer than ever. He'd underestimated the bond between mother and daughter, the resilience of women who'd already weathered storms together, the power of truth to overcome manipulation and lies. Ryan Morrison had made many miscalculations in his scheme, but perhaps his greatest error was believing that Chloe was just another mark, that I was just another obstacle to be removed. He hadn't recognized that in targeting us. He'd chosen opponents who would not only fight back, but would emerge stronger for having faced him. The gift of truth had cost him everything, and it had given us back each other. The courthouse was packed on the morning of Ryan's plea hearing. News of the case had spread, drawing reporters, curious onlookers, and most importantly, other women who suspected they might have been Ryan's targets before he moved on to Emma, Sarah, and Chloe. Chloe sat between Emma and Sarah in the front row, the three of them forming a united front. I sat directly behind them, alongside Elizabeth, who had flown in from Chicago to support us. Ryan's mother Olivia sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, looking small and diminished in a navy blue suit that hung loosely on her frame. When the bailiff called for all to rise, a hush fell over the crowd. Judge Marilyn Hawthorne entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Be seated," she instructed, surveying the packed courtroom with a practiced eye. "Case number 2025 CR 7845, United States versus Ryan Morrison, formerly known as Ryan Miller. This is a plea hearing pursuant to an agreement between the prosecution and defense." She turned to the defense table. "Bring in the defendant." The side door opened, and Ryan entered, flanked by 2 marshals. He looked nothing like the polished, confident man who had charmed his way into Chloe's life. His designer suits had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his carefully styled hair now lank and unkempt, his perfect smile nowhere to be seen. Instead, his face was drawn, his eyes downcast, his shoulders hunched. I felt Chloe stiffen in front of me. I reached forward and squeezed her shoulder gently. She reached up and placed her hand over mine, a silent acknowledgement of support. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Hawthorne addressed him directly, "I understand you wish to change your plea from not guilty to guilty pursuant to a plea agreement with the prosecution. Is that correct?" Ryan cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor. And you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to a trial by jury, your right to confront witnesses against you, and your right to maintain your innocence." "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. The court has reviewed the plea agreement. Before I accept it, I want to hear from you directly. Please explain in your own words the crimes to which you are pleading guilty." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his attorney, who nodded encouragingly. Ryan began, then stopped. He took a deep breath and started again. "I accessed offshore accounts containing funds that I knew were stolen. The accounts were established by my uncle, Jonathan Reed, with money he had embezzled from various business partners, including William Brooks. And did you know these funds were ill-gotten when you accessed them?" the judge pressed. "Yes, Your Honor. My uncle told me about them before he died. He told me that the money was rightfully ours, that William Brooks had somehow cheated him. But I knew that wasn't true. I saw the court documents. I knew the money was stolen. Yet you continued to access and use these funds." "Yes, Your Honor." "And did you deliberately target William Brooks' daughter, Chloe Brooks, with the intention of gaining access to her inheritance and assets?" Ryan's eyes flickered toward Chloe briefly before returning to the judge. "Yes, Your Honor. I researched her background, engineered our first meeting, and pursued a relationship with the intention of eventually gaining control of her finances, including any claim she might have to the stolen funds." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Hawthorne rapped her gavel once, silencing the crowd. "Mr. Morrison, the plea agreement indicates that you employed similar tactics with at least 2 other women. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor, Emma Morgan and Sarah Walsh." "Please describe your actions in those cases." For the next 30 minutes, Ryan detailed his schemes, how he'd researched wealthy families with daughters, how he'd created elaborate backstories and fake credentials, how he'd hired actors to pose as his parents, how he'd systematically isolated his victims from their support networks, and finally, how he'd attempted to gain control of their assets. It was chilling to hear him describe his methods so clinically, as if he were explaining a business strategy rather than a series of cruel manipulations that had left real emotional damage in their wake. "And are there other victims we don't know about?" Judge Hawthorne asked. Ryan hesitated, glancing at his attorney again. "Mr. Morrison, your plea agreement requires full disclosure," the judge reminded him. "There were 3 others," Ryan admitted finally. "Before Emma, the relationships didn't progress as far. I didn't gain access to their finances." Another murmur, louder this time. 3 more women who had narrowly escaped Ryan's web. Their names, the judge prompted. Jessica Turner of Chicago, Megan Campbell of Los Angeles, Diana Reyes of Miami. I watched as a woman in the back row of the courtroom visibly reacted to the last name, her hand flying to her mouth. "Diana Reyes," I presumed. hearing confirmation of what she'd perhaps only suspected until now. As part of your plea agreement, you've agreed to provide detailed information about all offshore accounts containing stolen funds. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. I've already provided the prosecution with account numbers, access codes, and locations for 11 different accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Panama. The total amount is approximately $28 million. $28 million. The amount was staggering. How many lives had Jonathan Reed destroyed to amass such a fortune? How many more would Ryan have destroyed if he hadn't been stopped? And you've agreed to make restitution to all victims, pay substantial fines, and serve 10 years in federal prison. Yes, Your Honor. There is one more condition of your plea agreement. You've agreed to make a public statement of apology to your victims. Are you prepared to do so now? Ryan nodded, though his reluctance was evident in every line of his body. He turned slightly to face the gallery, his eyes not quite meeting those of the women he'd harmed. I want to apologize to Emma Morgan, Sarah Walsh, and Chloe Brooks, he began, his voice mechanical. My actions were inexcusable. I deliberately misled you, manipulated your emotions, isolated you from loved ones, and attempted to exploit you financially. I betrayed your trust in the most fundamental way, and for that, I am deeply sorry. The words were right, but there was no genuine remorse behind them. Even now, facing the consequences of his actions, Ryan couldn't bring himself to truly acknowledge the human cost of what he'd done. Judge Hawthorne seemed to recognize this as well. Mr. Morrison, this court has seen many criminals over the years. Some stole out of desperation, others from greed, still others for the thrill. But what you did the calculated way you identified vulnerable women, inserted yourself into their lives, isolated them from their support systems, and systematically worked to control their assets shows a level of premeditation and cruelty that this court finds particularly disturbing. She adjusted her glasses, fixing Ryan with a penetrating stare. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 10 years as part of your plea agreement. I am inclined to accept this recommendation given the substantial assistance you've provided in locating the stolen funds. However, I want to be very clear were it not for that cooperation. I would have imposed the maximum sentence allowed by law. Ryan nodded, eyes downcast. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court imposes a lifetime ban on your handling of other people's finances in any professional or personal capacity. You will remain under supervised release for 5 years following your incarceration, during which time you will participate in mandatory psychological counseling. You will make full restitution to all victims as outlined in the plea agreement, plus interest and damages as determined by the civil courts. She paused, scanning the courtroom before returning her gaze to Ryan. Mr. Morrison, you systematically abused the trust of women who cared for you. You exploited their goodwill, manipulated their emotions, and attempted to steal not just their money, but their autonomy and self-worth. The harm you have caused extends far beyond financial loss. It will take years, perhaps decades, for your victims to fully recover from the emotional and psychological damage you inflicted. Ryan remained silent, his expression unreadable. I hereby accept your guilty plea and sentence you to 10 years in federal prison, to be followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are remanded to the custody of the United States Marshals Service to begin serving your sentence immediately. With a final rap of her gavel, it was done. The marshals stepped forward to escort Ryan from the courtroom. As he passed the front row, he finally looked directly at Chloe, Emma, and Sarah. His expression held a complex mix of emotions, anger, resentment, perhaps even a flicker of genuine regret. None of the women looked away. They met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated even now. In that moment, I saw the strength that Ryan had tried to break, but had ultimately only tempered, like steel through fire. As the courtroom began to empty, Chloe turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. It's over, she whispered. I pulled her into a hug. Yes, sweetheart, it's over. But I knew, as she did, that while the legal proceedings might be concluded, the healing was just beginning. The weeks following Ryan's sentencing were a whirlwind of activity. Patricia Winters worked tirelessly with the FBI and international banking authorities to recover the stolen funds Ryan had identified, one by one. Victims who had long ago given up hope of justice received calls informing them that their money, or at least a significant portion of it, had been found. Chloe received a check for $4.3 million, representing William's stolen $2.3 million plus accumulated interest. She stared at it for a long time when it arrived, sitting at my kitchen table with the check spread out before her. "It doesn't feel real," she said. "All those years Dad struggled after the bankruptcy. The double shifts you worked to keep us afloat. The scholarship applications I filled out because we couldn't afford college otherwise. And all that time, this money was sitting in an account in the Cayman Islands." I placed my hand over hers. "Your father never got to see justice done, but I think he'd be proud of how you handled all this." "I'm not keeping it," Chloe announced suddenly. "Not all of it. Anyway." "What do you mean?" "I'm going to use it to start that foundation we talked about, the Karen Brooks Foundation, to help women who've been targeted by financial predators, provide education about warning signs, offer legal support." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Chloe, you don't have to." "I want to," she interrupted firmly. Something good should come from all this pain. And what better way to honor the woman who taught me to stand up for myself? I couldn't argue with that logic. Nor did I want to. The foundation was established the following month, with Chloe as president, Emma as vice president, and Sarah heading up victim outreach. They invited Diana Reyes, Jessica Turner, and Megan Campbell to join the board as well, creating a powerful network of women united by their shared experience and determination to help others. The Foundation's first initiative was a series of webinars on recognizing and avoiding financial manipulation in relationships, taught by experts in psychology, law, and finance. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of women and men registering to learn about the warning signs they might have missed in their own relationships. "We've already had 3 women come forward who recognized their partner's behavior in our materials," Chloe told me excitedly after the first webinar. "They're leaving those relationships now, before it's too late." "You're saving lives," I said, and I meant it. Financial abuse might not leave physical scars, but its impact could be just as devastating. Summer arrived, bringing with it the first anniversary of what would have been Chloe and Ryan's wedding date. Instead of dwelling on what might have been, Chloe suggested we spend the week at the beach house, not just the 2 of us, but Emma, Sarah, and the other Foundation board members as well. "A retreat," she explained. "Part healing circle, part strategy session for the Foundation's next steps." The beach house came alive that week in a way it hadn't for years. 6 women, all at different stages of recovery from Ryan's manipulation, sharing stories, tears, and eventually laughter as they discovered their collective strength. I watched from the sidelines, providing meals and emotional support when needed, but mostly giving them space to forge their own bonds. On the final evening, as the sun set over the ocean, casting long golden rays across the water, Chloe arranged a small ceremony on the beach. Each woman wrote down something Ryan had taken from them: trust, confidence, financial security on a piece of paper. Then, one by one, they read their papers aloud before placing them in a small fire pit. "He took my belief in love," Emma said quietly, the first to speak. "Made me question every relationship I'd ever had. Wonder if anyone had ever truly cared for me, or just what I could give them." She tossed her paper into the flames. "He took my voice," Sarah followed. "Made me doubt my own thoughts, my own feelings, until I barely recognized myself." Her paper joined Emma's. When it was Chloe's turn, she stood silent for a long moment, staring at her paper. "He took my relationship with my mother," she finally said, her voice breaking slightly. "Made me push away the one person who had always been there for me, who saw through him when I couldn't." She looked at me as she dropped her paper into the fire. I smiled back, blinking away tears. After all 6 women had spoken, Chloe produced a second set of papers. "Now, we name what we've reclaimed, what we're rebuilding, what he couldn't ultimately destroy." "I've reclaimed my financial independence," Emma began, her voice stronger now. And I'm learning to trust again, starting with the women in this circle. I've found my voice, Sarah said, and I'm using it to help others recognize the warning signs I missed. Chloe's turn came last. I've rebuilt my relationship with my mother, she said, meeting my eyes across the fire. Stronger than before, because now I truly understand the depth of her love and the lengths she'll go to protect me. As darkness fell, they let the fire burn down to embers, 6 women standing in a circle on the beach, silhouetted against the dying light. I couldn't help but think how different this scene was from what Ryan had envisioned when he first set his sights on Chloe in this beach house. Instead of exploiting its value, he had inadvertently created a place of healing and empowerment. Later that night, as Chloe and I sat alone on the deck, watching the waves crash against the shore under a canopy of stars, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you ever regret it, sending that wedding gift? Starting all of this, I considered her question carefully. I regret that you had to go through the pain of discovering who Ryan really was. I regret that his actions hurt you and so many others. I paused, choosing my next words with care. But do I regret exposing the truth? No. The alternative, watching you slowly disappear into his manipulation, losing yourself piece by piece, would have been far worse. Chloe nodded, pulling her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. I think about that sometimes, what would have happened if you hadn't intervened. How far would it have gone? Would I have eventually seen through him on my own? Or would I have lost everything before I realized what was happening? You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, I told her. You might have figured it out eventually, but why should you have had to suffer through that when I could help? That's what mothers do, isn't it? She said softly. Help before we even know we need it. The good ones try, I agreed. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rhythm of the waves. I've been thinking, Chloe said finally, about selling my condo and building a small house here on the property, close to the beach house but separate. A place of my own, but near enough that we could have coffee together in the mornings, watch the sunset in the evenings. My heart swelled. After everything Ryan had done to separate us, after all his efforts to convince Chloe that distance from me was healthy, she was choosing to be closer. I'd like that very much, I said simply. She smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Me too. 1 year to the day after Ryan's sentencing, Chloe moved into her new cottage on the beach property. It was a charming structure, modern yet harmonious with the main beach house, situated just far enough away to provide privacy but close enough for easy visits. The foundation was thriving, having helped dozens of women escape financially abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. Emma had found love again, this time with a kind-hearted pediatrician who understood her past trauma and moved at her pace. Sarah had launched a successful podcast about financial literacy for women, drawing on her own experience to teach others how to maintain financial independence in relationships. And Chloe, she was flourishing in ways I hadn't seen since before Ryan entered her life. Her marketing career had expanded to include consulting for nonprofits focused on women's issues. She'd reconnected with old friends Ryan had pushed away and made new ones through the foundation. She'd even started dating again, cautiously, but with an openness that suggested healing rather than lingering fear. As for me, watching my daughter reclaim her life piece by piece was all the reward I needed. But Chloe had other ideas. Mom, we need to talk about the foundation, she said one morning as we shared coffee on my deck, the ocean stretching before us, glittering in the early light. Is something wrong? I asked, concerned by her serious tone. No, quite the opposite. We've been offered a major grant from the National Women's Foundation. They want to fund an expansion of our programs nationwide. Chloe, that's wonderful. It is, she agreed. But it would mean more work, more visibility, and they've specifically requested that you take a more active role. I blinked in surprise. Me, why? Because your story, the way you recognized the warning signs, investigated, and ultimately exposed Ryan, is exactly what they want to teach other mothers, sisters, friends. They're calling it the Trust Your Instincts initiative. I don't know, Chloe. I'm not sure I'm qualified. Mom, she interrupted gently. You're the most qualified person I know. You saw through Ryan when everyone else was charmed. You trusted your instincts even when I pushed you away. And you found a way to reveal the truth that even I couldn't deny. Put that way, it was hard to argue. What would I need to do? Speaking engagements, primarily. Sharing your perspective at conferences. Talking to women's groups. Maybe some media appearances. The grant would cover all expenses, plus a salary if you wanted it. I considered the proposal. At 65, I'd been enjoying a quiet retirement, split between my home garden and part-time work at the library. The idea of stepping into a more public role was daunting, but if my experience could help other families avoid what we'd been through, I'll do it, I decided. But I'm donating any salary back to the foundation. Chloe beamed. I knew you'd say that. My first speaking engagement was at a women's conference in Boston, a panel discussion titled, When Love Isn't Love, Recognizing and Responding to Relationship Red Flags. I was terrified, certain I'd freeze under the bright lights or forget everything I meant to say. But when the moderator asked me to share my story, the words flowed naturally. I spoke about those first dinner conversations with Ryan, the subtle warning signs I'd noticed, the gradual isolation tactics, the research that confirmed my suspicions, and finally, the wedding gift that exposed the truth. The most important thing I learned, I concluded, is to trust that feeling in your gut when something seems off. Our instincts are powerful tools, honed over thousands of years of evolution. When they tell us something's wrong, we should listen. The audience response was overwhelming. Women lined up afterward to speak with me, many in tears as they shared similar experiences or concerns about loved ones in potentially manipulative relationships. I found myself offering the same advice repeatedly. Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. That first panel led to others, then to workshops, then to a book deal, The Gift of Truth, A Mother's Guide to Recognizing Manipulation, co-authored with a psychologist specializing in coercive control. The foundation established training programs for law enforcement, social workers, and healthcare providers, teaching them to recognize the signs of financial abuse and manipulation. Ryan, meanwhile, served his sentence in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. We heard occasional updates through the legal system. He'd been a model prisoner, was participating in rehabilitation programs, had even begun counseling other inmates about financial responsibility. Whether his reformation was genuine or just another manipulation tactic, I couldn't say. But I hoped, for his sake, and for the sake of any women he might encounter after his release, that he had truly changed. 2 years after Ryan's sentencing, Chloe hosted a beach party to celebrate the foundation's success and to thank everyone who had supported its mission. The guest list included Emma and her new fiancé, Sarah and her podcast co-host, Diana, Jessica, and Megan, along with their families, Patricia Winters and her legal team, Agent Lopez, and even Ryan's mother, Olivia, who had become an unexpected ally in the foundation's work. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the gathering, Chloe clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. I want to thank you all for coming today, she began, scanning the faces of those assembled. 3 years ago, I thought I had found love with a man who turned out to be a predator. He isolated me from my family, tried to control my finances, and nearly succeeded in taking everything that mattered to me. She paused, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. But he didn't count on my mother. He didn't understand the bond between us, a bond that couldn't be broken by manipulation or lies. When I was at my most vulnerable, she didn't give up on me. She found a way to show me the truth, even when I wasn't ready to see it. Tears pricked at my eyes as Chloe continued. The Karen Brooks Foundation exists because one woman refused to be pushed aside, refused to be silent, refused to watch her daughter disappear into a manipulative relationship. And now, thousands of women across the country have been helped because of her courage. She raised her glass. To my mother, Karen Brooks, the strongest woman I know. As glasses were raised in my honor, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The pain Ryan had caused would always be part of our story, but it wasn't the end of that story. In fact, in many ways, it was just the beginning. The gift of truth I had given Chloe that day, wrapped in silver paper with a white bow, had indeed kept on giving not just to us, but to countless others who would now recognize the warning signs before it was too late. As the party continued around me, I watched my daughter move through the crowd, confident and joyful, stopping to chat with Emma about wedding plans, laughing with Sarah over an inside joke, embracing Olivia with genuine warmth. The sight filled me with more pride than I could express. Ryan had tried to take my daughter from me, but in the end, he had only brought us closer together. He had tried to exploit our vulnerabilities, but instead had revealed our strength. He had intended to destroy, but we had rebuilt something far more powerful than what existed before. Some wedding gifts really do keep on giving, and the gift of truth, once unwrapped, can never be taken back. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Have you ever had to protect a loved one from manipulation? What would you do if you were in my place? Your voice matters.